All right, today's video, I thought I would go over what equipment you would need if you were just wanting to start out in wedding photography. Talking kind of the bare necessities that you need to get yourself started as a wedding photographer. And I'll go over some stuff that I also suggest upgrading to when you are able to. Now this one should be extremely obvious, but you need a camera. Now, not just any type of camera and not just one camera. You're always going to need at least two cameras. I carry two cameras on me at all time, and it's also a great idea to also have a backup in your kit in case one of those go down. But the reason that we are running two cameras is that we have two different lens options on us at any time to be able to quickly switch over. We're not trying to change out a lens, but also in case you have one of your cameras go down in an important situation like, say, the ceremony. But what you do want to look for on a camera is you want to make sure that you have dual card slots. Dual card slots are extremely important anymore. Now, the dual card slots, I couldn't tell you exactly when it is that they came out, but there are some older DSLRs that they didn't have dual card slots, so people were definitely shooting without them. But nowadays, I think it's very important to have dual card slots on a camera so that you have that redundant system, so that if one of your cards fails, you know that it's still backing up onto a second card. You're not going to, it very much lessens the likelihood of you losing any of those photos. Now, as far as the brand of camera, that's going to be completely up to you. I think any major manufacturer makes fine cameras that work great. They've all got different perks. They've all got, they've all got pros and cons to them. Do your research on what it is that you like. But make sure that you are running, two of the same brands and preferably two of the same models. Let's say you're running with a Canon and you're doing R6. You can do an R6 and an R6 too. That's fine. Even an R5 and an R6 are going to go together just fine. The importance of having two of the same camera makes is that those color profiles are going to be they're going to be pretty much identical to each other. You don't want to be running a Sony and a Canon because it's two different types of files that come out of those. So your, say Capture One or Lightroom interprets those files a little differently. So, slapping a preset onto a Canon one versus a Sony, they are going to have a different look. So it's going to be a little more challenging during editing to try to edit photos from two different manufacturers to have them all have a cohesive look to them. Lenses. Obviously, if you got a camera, you need a lens. Starting out, I suggest going with prime lenses, like this Viltrox 85mm. I use mainly prime lenses. The only zoom lens that I use is a 55-200 that is usually only on during ceremonies. But for the most part, I am running a 14mm, 23mm, 56mm, and an 85mm, which I am running on the Fujifilm X-T series cameras, which are a crop sensor camera. So it does have a crop sensor effect to it. Kind of changes what the focal length is of it, just not the compression of the lens. So yeah, when it comes to lenses, right out of the gate, I would go with a 35, a 50, 85. I think those are great options. And the reason that you will hear most wedding photographers suggest prime lenses is because that aperture is going to be opening up a lot wider, allowing in a lot more light than, say, 24-70 2.8. You're talking another stop and a half of light there that you can gain from a prime lens. Now, in a wedding, there's many situations that you're going to be in that are going to be a lower light situation, and you're going to need that extra aperture to be able to allow in more light and not have to crank your ISO so much. Now, we all know on a mirrorless camera, you can bring up that ISO a good amount, but we still try our best to keep that ISO down as low as we can to not introduce that grain, unless that's something that you are actually going for. You can artistically use grain from the ISO, but for the most part, we just try to keep that ISO down so that we've got a nice clean picture right out the gate. If we want to add grain later, we can. I don't want an image coming straight out of camera that already has a ton of grain look to it because I had to crank my ISO well past 6400. The next one that I strongly suggest to any aspiring wedding photographer is going to be on-camera flash. Now, this is something you could get away with not having, but you are going to end up in situations where you're really wishing that you had an on-camera flash. As a photographer, photos are all lights and shadows, and being able to control any bit of light is going to help you out tremendously. An on-camera flash is not an extremely expensive piece to add to your kit. The Godox V1 Pros that I use, I think they run around $320, $330, something like that. Really not a bad deal. Excellent flash. I've done some videos on these, and there's tons of different reviews out there. But an on-camera flash, I'm going to say right out of the gate to get started in wedding photography is an absolute must-have. You have to have some type of way of being able to light situations to, be able to make a crappy lighting, a mixed lighting situation into a better one. So on-camera flash, I'm going to say is a must-have. Now onto some stuff that I wouldn't say is necessarily something you have to absolutely have to be getting into wedding photography, but it's something I suggest moving into when you are able to afford it. Save up some money, start investing a little more, and get into some off-camera flash. I think off-camera flash, at least for me, off-camera flash is extremely important during a wedding day. I use these primarily during the receptions for, say, the first dance or like the mother-father dances. I set these up either at the front, pointed in towards the dance floor, or kind of kitty corner from each other. And I am triggering it with a Godox X3 Pro. Now, these little triggers here can also power like the Godox V1 Pro, the little on-camera flash ones. You can set those off on a stand and use those as well. So the first one I would actually suggest would be getting a trigger. Get a trigger so that you can trigger your on-camera flashes, and then maybe step into something like the 8200 Pros. And another one is something like the Godox IT30. These little on-camera flashes, just, nice little compact one. So during a wedding, these are being used during the wedding reception, normally paired up with my 14mm lens. This is how I get those kind of overhead, dance photos. Everybody's dancing and going woo and stuff like that. These are the flashes that I am generally running on my camera with that 14mm wide angle lens to get those types of shots. Now, something I see a lot of newer photographers overlook is how it is that you're going to carry your cameras. I see some of them using those straps that come with the cameras, and in my opinion, they are absolutely horrible. And then there's a lot of options on Amazon. I see a lot of people pick up some of those cheap ones on Amazon, and I'm going to warn you right now that they're not going to work. They're going to work. They're going to hold your cameras until they don't, and they drop your camera. And then they have some of them that they're just a horrible design. It allows the cameras to slap together. They just kind of bounce all over the place, and they're not comfortable. So if you're going to be a wedding photographer, you're really wanting to get into wedding photography, get yourself a good strap. A good dual camera strap is going to be great. Either that or like the Spider holsters that hold them on your hip. Myself, I run the Holdfast Moneymakers. I'm sure you'll see there's a lot of people that run these, and there's a lot of people that run these for a reason. Now, they're not all that cheap. I think they run around $220, $230, but they're an awesome investment. These last forever. They're leather, extremely great hardware on them, and the way that they're designed, when you lift up one camera, it's not going to have the strap's not going to shift around on you. The weight stays extremely distributed. I could have just one camera on this strap, and you're not feeling that shift of the harness. It's a great harness. Running it 8-10 hours a day, it really doesn't bug me at all. Very comfortable, very durable. Highly suggest picking up something like this. I think this, in my opinion, is probably one of the best investments I ever made. They will last you years, just absolute years. Well, and there you have it. That is really what I can think of right now is the equipment that you really need to get yourself going. Right out of the gate, just make sure you have 2 lenses. Make sure you have a couple prime lenses. I would suggest, going with like a 35, 50, 85. Have those lenses there, on-camera flash, and a way of holding them. And then don't forget about storage. Make sure you are running good quality SD cards. Don't skimp out and buy the cheapest thing you can find, which I know right now SD cards, the prices are just astronomical. But the last thing you're gonna want is a cheap SD card that ends up failing on you and running that risk of, losing those photos. Those are a once in a lifetime photo. That's a photo that, those photos that are on there are something you can't recreate. You can't ask the couple to redo their wedding because you skimped out on your SD cards and have now lost all the photos. There's a lot of other things that you need to really look into as well. Different storage systems like your external SSDs, your NAS systems, cloud backup, all of that stuff. A lot of different pieces when it comes to being a wedding photography. But realistically, you could get started with a couple cameras, a few prime lenses, and an on-camera flash. If you have any questions, drop a comment, hit subscribe. I put out videos like this. I try to at least once a week. As my wedding season starts getting busier and busier, it does make it difficult, but I will try my best to keep posting informative videos like this in the future.